Luffy, Zoro, Nami, Sanji, Law, Robin, Boa, Carrot, Ace and Sabo, Yamato, Shanks, Katakuri, Kid, Usopp, Crocodile, Vivi, Odin, and Doflamingo, chances are that I've just named one of your favorite characters in One Piece, at least according to this recent popularity poll. But if you're like me, then your personal choice sits a little further down the list at the humble number 31 spot, complete with his notoriously white facial hair. And no, it's not Whoop Slap, sorry to any Grand Fleet members out there. No, this spot goes to Edward Newgate, the strongest man in the world. A man known to some as a monster, to others as a father, and to all as Whitebeard. He is, without contest, my favorite One Piece character aside from Luffy himself. I like him so much that I got not one, not one and a half, but two entire figures of the guy. In a story with hundreds of characters, I am impressed by how Oda continually finds ways to make them so memorable and unique. Newgate in particular is a shining example of this, and I'm even more impressed by how much of an impact this one guy still has on readers despite his short tenure, having died 500 chapters ago. I'd go as far as saying he's one of the most important additions to the story and is one of the few characters besides Luffy who is emblematic of One Piece's core themes as a whole. But beyond all that, he is just extraordinarily designed and written, so much so that today I'd like to borrow your ear for a minute and talk about why. Welcome, once again, to the Hidden Island, and today we'll be doing a complete character analysis and breakdown of the strongest man in the world. Edward Newgate was born on a New World island called Sphinx, a somewhat small country with a town on the shore. A peaceful island now, but in the past, Sphinx was too poor a country to pay the heavenly tribute to the world government, and thus, as they weren't a member nation, they were left with no protection. Lawless and subject to the rampant attacks of pirates and slavers, Newgate's country collapsed around him at an early age, unfortunately resulting in his orphancy. Without a family or any remaining friends, he was left to rise up from the ashes and survive on his own, but no matter how strong he became or how much he persevered, the one thing he couldn't regain was the family he lost. Eventually, this would lead him to become a pirate himself, not in search of gold or fame, but in search of something he felt was much more precious. While Newgate could never get his parents back, that didn't mean he could never have a family. Family, camaraderie, and belonging are the treasures he decided to find. Any of the money that he did come across on his travels didn't stay with him long, as he would send it back to Sphinx Island, having diverted all his personal wealth and resources to rebuilding his home. He created a pleasant, quiet village tucked away in the mountains where the children no longer had to suffer as he once did. During his journey as a pirate, he became a part of the Rock's crew, along with other future emperors Big Mom and Kaido. And despite the nature of the Rock's pirates still being somewhat unclear, my guess is that he likely joined out of a desire to find companionship. When that crew inevitably fell apart, he learned from it and formed his own, the Whitebeard Pirates, and the rest was history. Fathering a fleet of thousands of men, all of whom he referred to as his children, he quickly earned a reputation as the strongest man in the world, and became the singular major rival to the pirate king, Gold Roger. After Roger's passing, Whitebeard went on to dominate the Great Pirate Era, a living reminder of the terrifying power possessed by Roger's generation. But unlike other pirates, he never cared for the One Piece, and thus never became Pirate King. Instead, he dedicated his life to his new family, taking in pirates who also had no place in the world and giving them a home under his flag. Ultimately, it would end up taking the combined might of the entire world to finally put him to rest, and even in his final moments, Whitebeard died just as he lived, a legend, standing upright without a single scar on his back, never having run away from a fight. Needless to say, Whitebeard is a profound figure in the One Piece world, having played a major role in almost every era of piracy prior to his death. He was a core member of the Rock's Pirates, later a major rival to Roger, and finally, the dominating figure of the Great Pirate era following Roger's execution. But what makes him truly special, at least for me, is not how powerful or influential he was, but rather what he used that power for. Despite his intimidating appearance and dangerous reputation, Whitebeard is one of the most benevolent and sympathetic characters in the story, a far cry from the average pirate who more often than not tends to be violent and opportunistic. Unlike most, he was well known for bringing countries under his protection, keeping other pirates from pillaging and attacking those who couldn't fend for themselves. His crew had a deep familial love and respect for him, and he truly cared for them in return, showing forgiveness and understanding even in their worst moments of weakness. He always gave them the freedom to make their own choices and would risk his life to save even a single member of his crew. His family is a collection of people just like himself who had no one else in the world, no guidance, and nowhere else to go, so he took them in and called them his sons. He gave them a home and a place of belonging. Even though Roger was his rival, he didn't hesitate to treat Roger's son as his own. Much like with Ace, Roger only created the Great Pirate era, but he wasn't alive to raise it, take care of it, or watch it grow. Whitebeard inherited that burden in his place, and this connects to what really always fascinated me, because despite this, he never sought out the One Piece. Even when directly offered by Roger, Newgate turned down the notion of going to Laugh Tale. A vast majority of pirates could never do such a thing. It's unthinkable. But for Whitebeard, the reason was simple. In his mind, he had already found a greater treasure: family. That's what sets him apart for me. He's this intimidating and absurdly strong figure in the story who had the power to destroy the world, but also had a heart of gold. He operated under a clear moral code and is one of the only people who used his strength almost exclusively for helping others. Newgate's life goal is completely centered around parenting and protecting people. Your past didn't matter, your blood was of no importance. As long as he was your father and you were his son, then nothing else mattered. Not money, not fame, not fortune, and not even the One Piece itself. Now, before we talk about Whitebeard's place in the story and the personal qualities that make him so great, I want to take a minute to discuss his design philosophy and implementation. Let's start with the way he was introduced to us. During the Drum Island arc, we are met with a shadowy, enigmatic figure who is looking for Luffy. Immediately, this sort of thing is designed to grab our attention, like, whoa, this guy seems dangerous, he's gotta be bad news, right? And shortly into the Alabasta arc, we finally get our payoff and meet our man of mystery, but he doesn't seem to be a bad guy. Our first introduction to the Whitebeard pirates is actually someone rather kind, peaceful, and light-hearted, a stark contrast to what we've seen so far in the story. Someone rather similar to Luffy and the Straw Hats. Smoker identifies him as Portgas D. Ace, Whitebeard's 2nd Division commander, name-dropping both of them for the first time in the One Piece story, and as it turns out, Ace is directly related to Luffy. Here is where we get a few major revelations all at once. Luffy has a brother, this guy, and he is not only stronger than Luffy, but answers to another pirate, Whitebeard, who is even stronger than him. In fact, Ace believes this man to be the greatest pirate he's ever known, and wants to make him Pirate King. The first time someone in the story is presented as a direct competitor for Luffy's goal. Based on the reactions people have just by hearing Whitebeard's name, we know he's notorious, and after we get a front row seat to the Fire Fist gun show, it's pretty clear that Whitebeard isn't just another pirate. This man and his crew are serious business. In fact, every time we hear about him prior to actually seeing him, he's usually spoken about in the same breath as the Pirate King. Buggy lays it out loud and clear. He's the only man who could handle fighting Roger and is currently the strongest living pirate in the world. You don't mess with him under any circumstances. By this point, our imaginations are running wild. We're conditioned to expect a strong, confident, unbreakable pirate on the same level as Roger. And then we finally meet him. The strongest man in the world is introduced to us sitting down, hooked up to a life support system, with tubes in his nose being tended to by a team of nurses. Quite the opposite image from what most people are led to believe about the man. You expect some sort of monster, a mythical being almost, but you kinda just get Grandpa. Oda makes it evident in one panel that the title of strongest will soon be up for grabs, that the old era of legends is finally coming to a close with this aging captain, and yet, despite this presentation and Whitebeard's aging appearance, he still manages to sit atop the pirate world well past his prime, a testament to the level of power those legends really had. And this strength is communicated to us visually. I mean, just look at how large this guy is. He dwarfs everyone else in the panel. His nurses have to use stairs just to reach above his knees while he's seated, no less. He's easily the largest human character we meet up until this point in the story, and Oda does this to romanticize his legend and visually communicate his importance to us. Larger-than-life characters are literally larger in size, and thus Newgate is the largest person we meet up until that point, standing at 21 feet tall, or close to 7 meters. Absurd. Even the way he talks so dismissively and calmly about Shanks is telling. He has this regal, dominating aura about him despite clearly being ill and well past his prime. It's interesting how much Oda managed to take someone who looks like they're on the brink of death and simultaneously make him seem so untouchable, impressive, and intimidating. Oda could have just made him some scary-looking pirate, but he chose to add those tubes, that element of imperfection. It's that one little detail that gives him instant depth, that one piece of vulnerability juxtaposing the legend with the man. Now, I would be negligent to avoid mentioning his real-life inspirations, the real Blackbeard being the inspiration behind his moniker and his first name, Edward. Newgate comes from Newgate Prison, located in Britain, which is where many famous pirates from the Golden Age were held, including William Kidd and Henry Avery, the real Pirate King. But I have a whole video talking about this stuff already. What I didn't mention before is Benkei, a Japanese warrior monk who famously wielded a naginata, the same type of weapon Whitebeard uses. Benkei is said to have died proudly in battle, standing up under a volley of arrows, a major influence on Newgate's death, no doubt. His flagship, the Moby Dick, is unsurprisingly inspired by the novel of the same name, unless you're in Japan, where the book is called White Whale, a book wherein the protagonist is aboard a whaling ship hunting down, you guessed it. The white whale in this book can be interpreted to represent nature itself. Whitebeard is similarly depicted as an unstoppable force of nature, and can be said to have conquered the ocean over his long career of piracy, which is symbolically represented by Whitebeard riding atop the white whale itself. Absolutely insanely cool imagery, by the way. That panel of the white whale rising out of the water and Whitebeard proudly standing on top of its head is just so perfect. Oda has mentioned in an SBS that he chose the name Moby Dick simply because the source material felt fitting for a man like Whitebeard. I definitely see what he means. Okay, so this will probably go down as one of the weirdest topic transitions in a One Piece video. Just bear with me for a second, okay? I promise it'll make sense. We gotta talk about the mustache, and in order to do that, first we gotta talk about alchemy. Still with me? Great. So, I'm going to skip over the history of alchemy because that's frankly not important. What's important to know is that alchemy was basically a precursor to chemistry. It goes way, way back, and the main goal of it became turning cheap metals into precious metals like gold and silver. No surprise then, it was at its peak during the height of the 17th and 18th centuries, the golden age of piracy. This is why I feel like it's relevant. In order to denote certain elements and materials, they used things called alchemical symbols, which were just little pictures. This was before we had stuff like the periodic table. Anyway, what you also need to know is that they used the planets and the sun and the moon as symbols for their most important elements, but today we're only concerned with two of them, gold and silver. Going back to Whitebeard's mustache for a second, I think its design is no coincidence. The mustache is in the shape of a crescent moon, and thus I think the moon is an important symbol for Whitebeard. Don't believe me? Well, before One Piece was ever a thing, Oda created Romance Dawn, which was almost like a pilot episode for the series, and in there is a character named Crescent Moon Galley, named such because of his similarly crescent-shaped mustache. His Jolly Roger also featured the moon on it, and interestingly, Galley had the goal of becoming one of the best three, Romance Dawn's equivalent to the four emperors. Oda clearly recycled the idea of Galley when creating Whitebeard, complete with the emperor status, mustache, and crescent moon symbolism on the flag. This is taken even further with Whitebeard's design by making his primary color, well, white. The ship, the beard, the coat, everything is white, and I don't think you need me to connect the dots on the moon correlation here. But the nail in the coffin for me is his devil fruit. Just like the moon is the reason for tides and waves on the ocean, Whitebeard's power can command the ferocity of the sea. In fact, a massive tidal wave is the first introduction we ever get to his devil fruit power. This is all important when you consider that Roger inversely has a lot of associations with the sun. His association with gold and the color yellow for one, the color most often associated with the sun, a color that is prominently featured in his namesake, on his flag, and on his ship, with the latter literally being named the Oro Jackson after the Spanish word for gold, or how that same ship was built with the same wood used in making the Thousand Sunny. All the connections to Luffy, who is basically the sun's poster boy at this point, and Roger's son, Ace, see what I did there, possessed the power of fire. All the talk about the dawn of the world and the rising sun being directly connected with becoming Pirate King. It all comes together when we take a step back and turn our heads once more towards those alchemical symbols. Guess what? The symbol for gold is the symbol for the sun, and the symbol for silver, the runner-up to gold, is the crescent moon. When Roger died, the sun set on the world, and Whitebeard, possibly symbolizing the moon, took his place at the top, never becoming Pirate King, never replacing the sun, but holding its place in the sky until a new dawn begins. When the night is finally over and the moon is gone, the sun will rise again. In One Piece terms, Roger found the One Piece, Whitebeard confirmed its existence, and ultimately it's found again by Luffy. Ever wonder why the sun and moon are such important symbols in this series? It's because this cyclical nature, this passing of the torch that happens between the sun and the moon, right above our heads every single day, is the essence of inherited will. It's the oldest symbol of inherited will in our world. Before life itself ever came to be on Earth, the sun and the moon had already exchanged day with night, time and time again. Roger and Whitebeard, gold and silver, the sun and the moon. No wonder Whitebeard gave everything he had to protect Luffy, the next Pirate King, the next sun. And no wonder Whitebeard's greatest theme and treasure is family, because family is all about leaving something behind for the coming generations. Because, much like Whitebeard is surrounded by his family, the moon is surrounded by stars. I'd like to tie all of this symbolism together in a neat bow, but in order to do that, I have to bring up a rather sensitive subject. Whitebeard's original Jolly Roger. For those more well-versed in One Piece trivia, you may know where this is going. Apologies for any negative feelings this may bring up, but Whitebeard's original Jolly Roger actually looked like this. Wait, before you freak out. The symbol on this flag is not what you're thinking. It's actually a really old Buddhist religious symbol called the manji that was later misappropriated, altered, and misused by he who shall not be named on a monetized platform. You can see this symbol all over Asia and in many Buddhist temples and structures even today, and this is what Oda originally intended to be seen on the Whitebeard flag before Shueisha forced him to change it, obviously to avoid any confusion with the Western audience. The reason I bring this up is because of what it symbolizes and how that relates to Whitebeard. Why did Oda choose the manji? Well, the manji is a symbol for the harmonic nature of the world, such as the cycles of life and death, heaven and earth, the sun and the moon. In other words, it represents the same concept as inherited will, everything we've been talking about up until now. And even more interestingly, in Hindu culture, the right-facing manji represents the movement of the sun, while the left-facing one conversely represents the moon and the night. Whitebeard's manji is likewise facing the left, the direction of the moon, so while this design didn't last in the final story for obvious reasons, it is still noteworthy to consider the intentions Oda had when choosing that symbol as representative of Whitebeard. If he had his way, the moon and inherited will correlations would be even stronger. And all that from a fucking mustache. Go figure. So, symbolism aside, what is the reason for his character as a part of the greater narrative? Ace and Luffy's bond as brothers is more than enough to drive the message home, so why use Whitebeard to deliver a message about the importance of family and inherited will? Why not Ace? Well, Whitebeard is Oda's way of following up on the legacy Roger left behind. By the time skip, Oda needed to remind us as readers what we were fighting for, but the world's greatest treasure, the title of Pirate King, that had to be put on hold. Counter to the message, Ace was being tried and executed for the sins of his father. Rather than inciting a grand adventure, the events of Chapter 1 are now the reason our journey had to stop dead in its tracks. Luffy could not pursue his dream anymore, because now he had to save Ace. This fantasy, this ultimate untouchable goal that Luffy had been pining for since Chapter 1, on the surface seemed a bit shallow when his crew was gone and his brother's life was on the line. While the beginning of the story put a spotlight on Roger, it became clear over time that he was only a piece of the legend, that there were other incredible people, just like him, who played a part in shaping the world. And so Oda wrote a character who once stood head-to-head with Roger, now alone at the top as the last bastion of a bygone age, a new half to the legend, in the form of a man who took the Pirate King's legacy under his wing. While Roger is no longer around to show us what a Pirate King really looks like or what it's all about, Whitebeard remains as a living example, an extension of Roger's era, providing new depth to the dream that we had been following for 500 chapters prior. Roger's greatest treasure, the One Piece, is a complete mystery and something you can only acquire at the end of your adventure. For a while, people doubted it was even real, but it was that sense of freedom and wonder surrounding it that kicked off the story. Whitebeard's treasure, family, was the opposite. It was with us the whole time, driving the events, making the adventure worth it. The friends you made along the way, as cliché as it sounds, are just as important as the goals you achieve together. While the One Piece is a treasure everybody wanted to find, family is a treasure everyone already has. They're not fighting to get it, they're fighting to keep it. Your circumstances, your wealth, your accomplishments, none of that was required for you to have the capacity to love another. Only one person can be Pirate King, but anyone can be a son or daughter, brother or sister, mother or father. Family is such a precious thing that without it, the story would mean nothing. Imagine One Piece without the parties, without the jokes, and without the friendships. Even if Luffy became Pirate King or became the freest man alive, it would be worthless if he was alone. We learn through Whitebeard that it's not just about fighting for what you want, but also protecting what you already have. It's not just your victories that matter, but the people you celebrate those victories with. That is what a Pirate King is. If I were to ask you for some of the most important themes of the story, freedom and inherited will would be the most likely answers, right? But when you think about it, they're kind of contradictory, almost opposing ideas. If you are free, then why is there a need to inherit a will? If your destiny is an extension of somebody else's, then do you truly have any freedom? I say that this is a wrong way to look at it. Inherited will is not about destiny, it's actually a way to fight destiny. Even if you are the freest person alive, you are not truly free because we are all destined to die. Nobody can escape the changing ages or the ebb and flow of time. No matter how free you are, that is the one unchangeable reality for everyone, rich or poor, old or young, weak or strong. So how do you become free? You leave your dreams and your legacy behind for the next generation to inherit, because a man only dies when he is forgotten. In actuality, freedom and inherited will are complementary ideas, a way to make the most out of your life and live on after your death, which someone else will then carry on through their life and pass on to the next person after them. A cycle, not unlike yin and yang, or the sun and the moon, and here we come full circle, pun entirely intended by the way. Roger's treasure embodies that theme of freedom, the desire to change the way things are, explore the unknown, and rise to the top. The idea that there is something special out there, that you too can make an impact, that you can live a life full of freedom and adventure right now in the present moment. On the other hand, Whitebeard knew that a man, Pirate King or not, is still just a man. No one lives forever. Even if you are free today, you must ensure that those who come after you also have that same freedom tomorrow. You must secure the future. Newgate understood this, so he gave people a second chance at life aboard his ship and placed his faith in the next generation rather than clinging onto his. This is why family matters so much, because what is family if not inherited will? The passing of the torch, the imparting of lessons, memories, and ambitions, placing trust in those you care about to carry on your dreams even after you are gone. The point is, Roger and Whitebeard's dreams and ideals both make up the framework of One Piece, Luffy's story, and his version of Pirate King. Finding the One Piece and finding where you belong, choosing how you live and how you are remembered. Freedom and inherited will, the major forces that have driven this adventure. These legendary pirates are written to provide a model for Luffy to live up to, and the further we get into the story, the closer the resemblance becomes. Ever since the beginning, we've always looked at Luffy as a vector for Roger's will, as a direct successor who embodies everything Roger was, and who can blame us? The hat, the dream, the personality, the letter D, the Roger connections are all over the place, everywhere you look in the story, but there are just as many connections to Whitebeard that we should acknowledge. Pre-time skip One Piece begins with Roger, but it also ends with Whitebeard. When Roger died, he had created and left two things behind, his son Ace and the Great Pirate Age, two big influencers on Luffy's upbringing, but it was Whitebeard who inherited both those things from Roger and fathered them in his place. When Ace died, so did he, and so did the era. When Luffy arrived at Marineford, he had just come off a hot streak of losses. He lost his crew to Kuma, nearly died, and barely escaped Impel Down with his life. The world around him was becoming increasingly more dangerous and hostile. Not only could he no longer protect his crew, but now he could barely protect himself. Now he needed the help of others just to stay alive. When we get to the war, the losses continue to pile up. Luffy gets his moments now and then, but he is basically just running towards Ace with reckless abandon. He's outclassed by nearly every major fighter there and practically gets tossed around like a ragdoll. It takes the combined efforts of some of the strongest pirates in the world to keep him from kicking the bucket. It even takes his brother sacrificing his own life to keep Luffy from losing his. Every action he takes in Marineford is a desperate scrap for survival, pushing himself to his limits with every step he takes towards Ace. Here we see the truth. The gap between Luffy and his dream is still immeasurably large, more so than he could have predicted. Put simply, he was just not ready, and to illustrate that gap, Oda gave us Edward Newgate front and center. While the Marineford saga as a whole was about Luffy and Ace, the Marineford arc is more about Whitebeard than Luffy. It's his war, punctuated at the beginning and end by his arrival and later his death. The entire battlefield pretty much revolved around him, and he had a majority of panel focus in the arc. For once, Luffy isn't stealing the show. He's the only person Luffy had met in the story who was already at the level required to become Pirate King. He shows us, the reader, how high Luffy is going to have to climb in order to do something as simple as save a friend, let alone become King of the Pirates. In other words, he's everything that Luffy needs to become by the end of the story. Whitebeard single-handedly commanded a fleet of over 1,000 pirates and brought the war directly to the government's doorstep, no breaking and entering needed. In stark contrast to Luffy, every time he advanced, every time he attacked, it was treated like an event. Marines frantically running and shouting, "The world's strongest man is attacking, Whitebeard is moving," and so on and so forth. Even in his old age, while physically ill, he had the strength to take on the entire combined force of the Marine infantry, the 7 warlords, and the admirals. This man was true to his reputation, an unstoppable force of nature. By the end of the war, he suffered 267 sword wounds, 152 bullet wounds, 46 cannon wounds, and that's on top of having a hole punched in his chest and half his face missing. Numbers I'm certain you are already aware of. So yeah, he was completely tanking inhuman amounts of damage and still managed somehow to die on his feet. Doesn't get any more badass than that. No matter which way you look at it, Whitebeard bore the mark of a true captain, someone capable of standing above all other pirates, commanding their respect and leading the charge alongside them into battle. A pirate king in everything but name, and more importantly, a person capable of protecting his family. And all this effort, putting everything on the line, ready to give his life just to save one person, one member of his crew. Sounds a lot like Luffy, doesn't it? As far as I'm concerned, Whitebeard was the second Pirate King. Luffy is succeeding his era, not Roger's. It's kinda subtle, but Newgate and Luffy have quite a few important qualities in common. They both led separate raids on Marineford at the same time, completely independent of each other. They both have a tendency to shout and declare themselves by name, especially in a fight. They each share notably similar experiences with the death of their ships, also demonstrating to us that, much like Luffy, Whitebeard considered his ship a part of the family. Speaking of which, they both became family with Ace and gave him a sense of belonging in the world, and although they tried saving him, they also both failed. Whitebeard because he was too old, and Luffy because he was too young. As the story goes on post-time skip, we now see Luffy following in Whitebeard's footsteps as much as he is Roger's. For the longest time, Fishman Island was Newgate's territory, as flying his flag prevented other pirates and slavers from kidnapping mermaids and raiding the kingdom. The last thing Luffy does before entering the New World is claim Fishman Island as his territory, becoming their new defender in Whitebeard's place. Not long after that, Luffy manages to attain a massive fleet totaling over 4,000 men, made up of various strong pirates and colorful characters, extremely reminiscent of the Whitebeard fleet, forgive me for pointing out the obvious. Also worth mentioning is how Luffy and Whitebeard similarly stumble their way into meeting their respective Kozuki, and welcome them each aboard their ship along with 3 retainers, but things get really interesting when we arrive at Wano, more specifically on Onigashima. Because in my opinion, Onigashima is Luffy's Marineford. It is the culmination of everything Luffy has learned and accomplished since the time skip. Once again, we are presented with a captive, an execution stand, a subsequent raid, and a major earth-shaking war involving many of the strongest forces in the world, except this time, Luffy is the one in the driver's seat. Luffy is the one leading the charge, planning and executing the raid with his crew, saving those he cares about, and fighting head-to-head at the top of the pirate world. Luffy is the Whitebeard of this war, and his opponents, the other 2 emperors who shared a spot with Newgate among the Rock's crew. Considering Kaido planned on fighting Whitebeard on the way to Marineford, which is also the first mention of him taking any action in the story, this particular battle is a long time coming. Quite appropriately, former Whitebeard commanders Izo and Marco show up to give Luffy their support yet again for one last hurrah. And now, just like Whitebeard, we are watching Luffy fight at the top level, taking terrifying amounts of damage that would probably kill 99% of other characters in One Piece, and yet Luffy tanks these hits like a champ. Even when he's ready to die, he still pushes beyond his fear and fights. He keeps getting back up. He keeps fighting. The feats being accomplished by Luffy in this one fight are nothing short of legendary, and it's finally being made clear to us that the gap we once witnessed back at Marineford is now officially gone. Luffy has closed the gap, and now he's ready to take the next step towards becoming Pirate King. The only thing left to do is survive this war. Then he can truly come into his own as a legend, standing from the same heights that Roger and Whitebeard did before him. There's been a running joke in the One Piece community about deadbeat dads and fathers who were all around not present for their children's lives. This situation tends to happen quite a lot in One Piece actually, and for pretty much every major character there is a distinct lack of parenting in their childhoods. I know that it's fun to joke about Yasopp or Dragon and now even Shanks from time to time, but I do think we should step back and ask ourselves why the story is written in this way. Many of the characters who we follow were, much like Whitebeard, forced to grow up at a very young age and survive in a hostile, unforgiving world all on their own. Oftentimes, blood relations are meaningless, as even when parents are in the picture, they aren't averse to bad parenting. Other times, the blood in people's veins is used against them as an excuse to take their freedoms away. So, what is Oda trying to say with all this? That family is bad? Well, if you've gotten this far, then you know that answer is a resounding no. What he is saying is that family, and by extension inherited will, are not determined at birth. Your blood does not determine your destiny. You still have the freedom to shape who you are, and that includes who you choose to call family. This is a running theme in One Piece, and it's a major reason why I am baffled by people in the community who are so against main characters having important relatives in the story. Look, I understand that it seems like their destinies were set for them a little too conveniently, but the entire point that Oda is making is that your family, in fact, doesn't determine who you are. He almost always uses blood relatives to contrast with his other characters, not to compare them. Luffy is nothing like Dragon personality-wise and is in a completely oppositional faction to his grandfather. Sanji is the exact opposite of Judge in every conceivable way. Yamato is nothing like Kaido and disowned him completely, and she bonded deeply with Ace, who did the exact same thing. Ace resented his actual father, who was never there for him. Ace was hunted for a crime he didn't commit, all because they assumed he would follow in his father's footsteps, but in reality Ace didn't even want to become Pirate King. Ultimately, he chose his own father to follow and chose to make him Pirate King instead. In most of these scenarios, these characters find their own adoptive parental figure. Luffy and Shanks, Sanji and Zeph, Yamato and Oden, Ace and Whitebeard. These characters went out on their own and chose whose will they'd inherit. They found their own family, and by extension, their own destiny. Which finally brings me around to the subject of Edward Weevil, the supposed son of Whitebeard himself. First of all, I don't think this is true. I mean, just look at the guy. Half of his body looks stitched together, and with that hair and the implication that Bakin was on Rox's crew, I wouldn't be surprised if he was actually Hishiki's kid instead. But even if we grant that Whitebeard Jr. here may just be unfortunately ugly, his existence flies in the face of Oda's entire message and destroys Whitebeard's legacy. All of a sudden, he's just another one of those deadbeat dads, which is why I don't believe it to be true. Bakin is without a doubt a lying manipulator, just trying to take advantage of everyone, and I don't think it's any different here. I think that Weevil is an inversion on the formula. Rather than escaping from his heritage, he is chasing after it. He believes that he is Whitebeard's biological son, and therefore feels entitled to his legacy. The wiki puts it better than I ever could. Quote, "Unlike his alleged father, Weevil does not hold concepts of family in the same regard, believing that his alleged blood heritage is what makes him true family, not bonds built on friendship and camaraderie. Because of this, he violently attacks all those once affiliated with Whitebeard." To contrast with Newgate, we even see Bakin refer to her son as her treasure, but she doesn't mean this in the family is treasure sense, but rather in the you're my ticket to inheritance money sense. She even rips Whitebeard's line to Squard, but in this context it is being used solely for manipulation. Weevil thinks he's inheriting Whitebeard's legacy, but he's actually just following Bakin's orders and in the process destroying it. So let's end today's discussion with my hopes and predictions. I think Weevil's character arc is going to be used to hammer this message home rather than ruin it. At some point in the story, Weevil will try attacking Sphinx Island, but somewhere in the process he's going to learn the truth, that Newgate was not his father after all. Once he stops being a useful idiot for Bakin, his only actual biological parent, she's going to abandon him, and suddenly he'll go from having a mother and father to having none at all. Now orphaned, I believe he'll be taken in by the people of Sphinx Island, ironically Whitebeard's home. I can picture the cover stories now, with Weevil standing guard in the village or maybe napping alongside a sphinx. They do share some visual similarities, don't they? The overpronounced brow that looks like a butt head, the jagged teeth, the imposing size, the weird proportions. This guy would fit right in. Weevil will find companionship in the people he was once ready to attack. A home among people who share no family ties with him, demonstrating that blood is not what determines family, and with a new place of belonging, Weevil will remain on Sphinx Island as a gentle giant, guarding the family and legacy Whitebeard left behind. So, there's a big reason why all of this is so significant to me, why I went out of my way to write one of my longest videos about a single character. All this talk about families, fathers, and sons really resonates with me. Something about Whitebeard's crew and the drama that played out around them felt very believable. I actually find Ace to be one of the most relatable characters in the story, because not only am I an older brother myself, but I grew up largely without my father in the picture. I'm not afraid to talk about it. It's something that has shaped a lot of my upbringing. I spent a lot of time as a kid alone and unable to find my way in the world, so I understood the resentment and frustration that Ace felt. I'm not sure if Oda drew from real-life experiences, but nonetheless he captured it perfectly. Much like with Ace, every time I'd make a mistake or do something wrong, I was convinced that it was my genetics at work. Many times I remember wishing for a proper family. Other times I worried that when I got one, I would lose it, and I would be doomed to repeat the mistakes of my father. But here I am. I have friends. I somehow have fans, and I have a family of my own. Maybe not the one I started with, but one that makes me happy. When I read Marineford, when I saw what Oda was trying to say about family, when Whitebeard reached out and offered Ace his hand, in a weird kind of way it felt motivating. Almost like Oda saying through Whitebeard to me that the world doesn't have to be so cruel. Which is also why his final moments gut-punched me in a way that has never been matched in the series since. I could never forget how this character and this piece of writing made me reevaluate my own life circumstances. Maybe it's silly to connect something so personal to a fun comic about pirates aimed well outside of my demographic. Maybe I shouldn't read into it too deeply, but I can't lie. Oda is saying something very real here. It's not some grand social commentary or some philosophical statement about fatherhood. It's just a small lesson about what really matters, about what really makes someone family. What Whitebeard wanted and what his crew wanted, I get it, man. I would have become his son too. That's going to be all I have for today, guys. Sorry I'm late with this one. Writing and organizing all my thoughts on this topic took a lot of energy out of me. I hope it paid off, though. If you enjoyed today's show, please make sure to come and join my family by leaving a like and subscribing to help the channel keep vibing. And finally, until the next time we're on, have a wonderful day, night, and romance dawn. See ya.